Indo-Pacific have never been only a matter of chance and weather. They are the highways of trade, the pathways of diplomacy, and increasingly a theatre of military signalling where every transit and exercise carries a message. Over the last few weeks, that message has grown louder and clearer. Routine passages no longer read as routine, and every ship, squadron, and salvo is being interpreted through the lens of competition. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense said the Liaoning sailed through the Taiwan Strait. The carrier's passage on April 20, 2026 was more than a navigational fact. Carriers are the most visible instruments of maritime power projection. Their movements are tactical acts that are also symbolic acts, meant to be read by a range of audiences, domestic, regional, and global. In a theatre where geography compresses risk, a carrier moving through the narrow defiles around Taiwan is necessarily a message. For some, it signals routine, training, and persistence. For others, it raises alarm. At almost the same moment, Allied forces assembled around the Philippines for an unusually large iteration of a decades-old exercise. The Philippine military said more than 17,000 personnel will participate in Balikatan 2026. What had been a predominantly bilateral rehearsal between Manila and Washington expanded this year into a more explicitly multilateral event. Japan joined in operational roles. Canada participated as a full partner, and established contributors including Australia, France and New Zealand took part. The drills, running through late April into early May, stretched across land, air and sea. Amphibious rehearsals, live fire ranges, complex interoperations where carriers and destroyers were maneuvering. Those parallel lines of activity, Chinese naval deployments and expanded Allied exercises, are not independent phenomena. They reflect an alignment of trend. Sen, an outward extension of Chinese naval operations, deeper and more visible Allied cooperation to reassure partners and deter coercion, and a global environment in which signalling at sea has become central to statecraft. The choreography has a logic, show capability, demonstrate will, and shape perceptions, but the logic is also hazardous because the space in which these signals are sent is both crowded and fragile. Japan's maritime authorities reported that Chinese warships sailed between Yonaguni and Iriomote in Okinawa's southwest island chain in mid to late April. Those passages through narrow island channels are legally permitted, but they are also politically sensitive. Tokyo publicly signaled close attention. Officials made clear they would monitor entries into territorial waters and stress that sovereign limits matter. Beijing, meanwhile, framed its activities in a different register. Chinese military statements and state media characterized deployments as part of expandi. Seas, far seas, training and routine drills designed to test long-range sustainment and joint operations. The deliberate choice of language, far seas, training, routine, aims to normalize presence even as the volumes and distances of deployments change. When official communications cross paths like this, interpretation matters as much as action. For Allied capitals, gatherings like Balikatan are reassurance, practical rehearsals to operate together in the face of a range of contingencies. For Beijing, those same deployments can be read as containment or a narrowing of strategic space. Each side sees deterrence differently, the former as visible readiness, the latter as encirclement. Rhetoric ramps up, so does the chance of miscalculation. Across the water from Manila, the PLA's Southern Theatre Command announced that Task Group 107 had carried out exercises east of Luzon, describing the operations as necessary responses to the regional situation. The Southern Theatre Command said, "This is a necessary operation in response to the current regional situation, and it was fully in compliance with international law and practice." State media released imagery of surface combatants and task forces at sea. Official lines emphasized legal compliance and the testing of integrated sea air capabilities. For Beijing's military, such displays are intended to demonstrate readiness to sustain operations away from home ports and to signal coordination across services. The strategic geometry of the Indo Pacific amplifies risk. Natural choke points, straits, channels, narrow seas, concentrate both commerce and potential conflict. When large ships and aircraft practice in the same corridors that carry bulk cargoes and container traffic, the margin for error shrinks. A near miss between a warship and a merchant vessel, a misread radio transmission, or an unannounced safety zone can blow up into a political incident. Shipping companies already price perception into operations when TSP odds flare, insurers and charterers rewrite or demand higher premiums, which cascades into higher costs and delays for global supply chains. The human dimension of this moment is immediate and concrete. Sailors on watch face real, time-sensitive decisions. Port workers adjust schedules. Families in coastal towns see unusual ship traffic and feel the anxiety of proximity to potential flashpoints. National security is rarely just abstract doctrine. It touches daily life, livelihoods, and markets. That is why risk mitigation, practical, procedural, institutional matters as much as hardware. Analysts who study Maritime crises underline a simple, repeated lesson. Deterrence and dialogue are not mutually exclusive. Robust postures can be accompanied by reliable crisis management tools. Hotlines between military commands, prearranged notifications for exercises, agreed frameworks for incident investigation, and the habit of timely, transparent communications can dampen escalation. Where mechanisms exist and are trusted, they have repeatedly reduced the odds that small accidents metastasize into larger confrontations. Where they are weak or absent, misreadings become far more dangerous. This season has also shown how national defense postures are shifting. Tokyo's increased operational participation alongside the United States and the Philippines reflects an evolving security calculation. Officials in Tokyo say they seek to be a more active contributor to collective deterrence in waters close to Taiwan and the South China Sea. For Japan, that is a recalibration born of geography and an assessment of regional dynamics. For other partners, Japan's presence marks a normalization of multinational security practice in spaces that were, not long ago, dominated by more narrowly focused bilateral arrangements. Outside the immediate choreography of ships and planes, diplomatic responses have been varied. Some capitals have urged restraint and called for clearer channels of communication. Others, most notably Moscow, have criticized expanded trilateral or multi-tanner drills, framing them as escalatory or exclusionary. The mix of voices highlights an awkward regional truth. There is broad agreement on the need to avoid miscalculation, but far less consensus on what balance of presence and reassurance achieves that aim. Economic stakes sharpen the geopolitical picture. The Indo Pacific sea lanes carry oil, liquefied natural gas, manufactured goods and raw materials that keep factories and economies running. Temporary safety zones, rerouted commercial routes and the spectre of higher insurance premiums impose real calculable costs. A detour around a contested area adds days to transit times and dollars to the bill of goods. For supply chains built on tight margins and just-in-time logistics, those ripples matter. So what practical steps reduce risk without surrendering deterrence? There are several durable approaches, none of them simple. First, predict. Ability states that practice disciplined, predictable conduct at sea, clear notifications, adherence to recognized rules of the road, professional bridge-to-bridge communications make it harder for routine moves to be mistaken for hostile intent. Second, layered communications. Military hotlines, liaison channels, and regular senior-level talks reduce ambiguity. Third, transparency in exercises, advanced, detailed notifications about safety zones, schedules, and participating units make it possible for civilian mariners and neighboring navies to plan around activity. Fourth, multilateral confidence building. Forums where rules of engagement, air and sea, proximate operations, and incident responses are discussed and rehearsed lower the probability that an accident will cascade. Those prescriptions are not novel. They are the distilled lessons of past crises. But their implementation is political as well as technical. Building trust around sensitive military activity requires repeated co-building, operative behavior, and willingness to absorb short-term political costs for longer-term stability. That work is slow. It is also reversible. Trust that takes years to build can be eroded in days by a poorly handled standoff. The leadership choices in capitals matter. From Beijing to Washington, Tokyo to Manila, decisions about posture, transparency, and diplomatic outreach will shape whether the Indo-Pacific's arteries remain stable conduits or harden into contested fault lines. Political leaders set the tone for their militaries and for the diplomaticaries and for the diplomaticary instruments that can ease tensions. In this moment, the call for strategic steadiness is both a policy preference and a practical necessity. On the business side, shipping firms, insurers, and ports are already adapting. Risk assessments now incorporate geopolitical indicators as routinely as weather forecasts. Contingency planning touches everything from route selection to fuel burn to contractual clauses for delay. Ports are refining. Contingency operations and supply chain managers are mapping alternative modes. These adjustments will continue as long as ambiguity around maritime operations persists. There is also a generational dimension, the current pattern of activity, frequent transits by carrier and task groups, larger multilateral drills, and more publicized exercises appears likely to continue. Navies are drilling to operate in contested spaces. Partners are drilling to deter. That creates a denser maritime commons where every transmission, formation, and silence is interpreted for intent. The combination of modern sensors, social media, and instantaneous imagery means that moves at sea are now public events. The speed of information increases the speed of political reaction. If there is a pragmatic consensus among maritime strategists, it is this: strength without discipline is dangerous. Dialogue without deterrence is brittle. The balance requires both a realistic appreciation of the security environment, a durable commitment to institutionalized risk reduction. That means maintaining capable, ready forces while also committing to clarity, open notifications, channels for real-time military-to-military contact, and agreed mechanisms to investigate incidents. It is the quiet scaffolding behind the loud signals of fleets and carriers. The coming months will test how well that scaffolding holds. Forces will continue to maneuver and partners will continue to rehearse. Each movement will be part of a larger narrative that must be managed with care. The choices made in capitals, how much to publicize, how much to coordinate, how ready to be, will determine whether shipping lanes remain open arteries of commerce or harden into recurrent flashpoints. For now, the choreography persists. Fleets sail, aircraft patrol, and partners train. Each action contributes to a story that nations must write thoughtfully, combining the credibility that deterrence demands with the restraint that diplomacy required. The IAs, if that combination can be found and sustained, the region stands a better chance of preserving the freedoms of navigation and the economic flows that underpin so many lives. If it cannot, routine passages may become the prelude to a crisis no one intends. In an age when ships and words carry equal weight, the imperative is simple and stark. Couple readiness with restraint and make the hard investments in transparency and crisis management that keep a crowded sea from boiling over. The lives of sailors, the schedules of ships, and the stability of markets all depend on the choices made now and on the patience and imagination to keep the water open for the generations that follow.